A monster recruiting weekend for LSU. We've got all the details. It's Locked on LSU. Let's go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Glad to have you aboard with us here. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. We are free, available wherever you get great podcasts. So please subscribe to the podcast. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button. We appreciate you for being there as well. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So we will recap the Bayou Splash. Massive recruiting weekend for the Tigers for 25, 26, and 27. Also, two of LSU's premier prospects squaring off on Monday in Major League Baseball, and yours truly will be there. Excited to talk about that coming up. Let me begin, though, with some really good news for Brian Kelly and the LSU Tigers, as on Sunday night, LSU popped a commitment from Jalen Chapman. So Jalen Chapman is a 2026 offensive lineman out of New Orleans, 6'2", 265. He's out of Warren Easton in New Orleans. When you look at the recruiting rankings, it's not something that's necessarily going to pop. And a big part of that is, well, remember, this is a rising junior. So he just finished his sophomore year of high school, going into his junior year. So he's a 3-star. He's the 35th best interior offensive lineman in the country in the composite. And for 2026, he's the 11th best player in the state, again, out of Warren Easton. But I often say this, and maybe this is most important to think of whenever you really start to look at future classes, is not only what is the recruiting ranking, but who are the programs that are offering this prospect. I always look at that when it comes to recruiting, not necessarily the ranking or the star rating or any of that stuff. It's who is offered this player. And when we look at Jalen Chapman, he's been offered by LSU, Alabama, Southern Cal, Oregon, Arkansas, Tennessee. I mean, there are some big name programs. Now, there's also smaller schools. There's Tulane and Troy, Alabama State, Grambling. There's some of those, UTSA. Those are there as well. But typically, when you see a player with a lower recruiting ranking and that kind of offer list, typically what happens is you have a guy where he's gone to elite camps and the premier programs have taken notice and said, oh, yeah, he's going to keep growing, keep getting better. And by the time he signs on the dotted line or shows up on a college campus, he's going to be a high 4-star and one of those types of players. And it sure feels like that's the case there with Jalen Chapman. Now, this is huge for two reasons. For a lot of reasons. A couple of primary reasons. Number one, look at the two primary recruiters for Chapman. Primary is his offensive line coach, Brad Davis, again, from Baton Rouge, who is just obliterating the recruiting game right now. And his secondary recruiter is Frank Wilson. Of course, Brad Davis, for all the reasons we've talked about a ton. One of the smartest moves Brian Kelly made was retaining Brad Davis, because not only is he a great technical offensive line coach, but clearly has shown his recruiting chops. And we've seen every single year that Brian Kelly has been here, LSU has landed elite offensive line prospects. If you want to talk about Will Campbell and Emory Jones, you want to talk about Lance Hurd, who obviously has now transferred to Tennessee. You want to talk about the guys from the 24 class that are coming in that LSU super high on, guy like Ethan Callaway. You want to talk about flips from A&M? Yes, big time. And the same is true for the 25 class as well. You've got Carius Kern, the number one interior offensive lineman in the country, already committed for the class of 2025. And clearly they're starting already on 2026. So the fact that you have that recruiting tandem there, Brad Davis, and then Frank Wilson as well, something to keep in mind with the 2026 class for LSU. LSU's 2026 class presently has 3 commits. Richard Anderson out of Edna Carr in New Orleans. Jalen Chapman out of Warren Easton in New Orleans. Kai Anderson out of McDonough 35 in New Orleans. So, yes, Frank Wilson, hiring Frank Wilson, one of the smartest things Brian Kelly did, because LSU continues to own the New Orleans area. And if you're going to recruit effectively at LSU, you have got to be effective in New Orleans. And very clearly, Brian Kelly's been able to do that in large part here thanks to the work of Brad Davis and, of course, Frank Wilson. One other thing worth keeping in mind as we talk about offensive line, you are going to have, and I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here, but you are going to have massive offensive line turnover after the 24 season. You're going to lose 4 starters on your offensive line. Will Campbell and Emory Jones are going to the draft, and then obviously Garrett Dellinger and Miles Frazier are going to be out of eligibility. So you can be really high on the LSU offensive line and what's next. And I think they've recruited well enough to be really good there and will continue, obviously, to be really good along the offensive line. But it is fair to ask the question, like, what does it look like, beyond this season? I really like some of the young guys that have come in here. Cohen Eccles was one of the Texas A&M flips, who's a highly regarded guy. DJ Chester is going to start this year as a sophomore, be back in 2025 for his junior year. So when you talk about getting to 26 and beyond, Weston Davis is one of those guys we talked about. Another big offensive tackle, a 5-star. Guys like Ori Williams. I mean, you have a lot of really big, talented offensive linemen, but beyond 2024, you don't know what that room looks like. So you're going to have to fortify not only with numbers, but in the transfer portal as well. And you're continuing to do that not only for 25, but for 26 as well. So LSU pops Jalen Chapman, an offensive lineman out of New Orleans for the class of 2026, coming off the Bayou Splash weekend. Speaking of the Bayou Splash, what a weekend it was for Brian Kelly and the guest list they had at the Bayou Splash. We're going to talk about all of that as we continue here on Locked on LSU, your team every day. Love to tell you about our friends over at Ibata. You know what? Kind of crazy when you think about it. You go on vacation, you spend all this money, and we're in that number as well. We went to the beach this year, and we go over to Florida, to 30A, and we just have this endless amount of stuff. And I'm not just talking about our clothes, but I mean things like drinks and chips and sandwich stuff and everything that you get when you go on vacation. But if you use Ibata, you're going to make actual money, cash back on all of those purchases. Ibata is a free app unless you earn cash back every time that you shop. So you can earn on hundreds of items, from groceries and beauty supplies to even toys for your kids. So make sure that you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibata user earns $256 per year. I mean, that could cover an entire shopping trip, a flight to that vacation maybe you want, a fancy dinner on an anniversary, whatever it may be. We're not talking about giving you points. We're talking about actual cash back that you can withdraw to your bank account, PayPal, or if you want, in gift cards. It simply add offers in the app, upload your receipt, and then voila, the money is yours. So right now, Ibata is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibata when you use the code Locked On College. One word, Locked On College, when you register. So go to the App Store or the Google Play Store, download the free Ibata app to start earning cash back. You can use the code Locked On College. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or the App Store. And be sure to use the code Locked On College. Hey, I also am so excited on today's episode to tell you about Factor. And I'm really excited because when I opened up our weekly schedule and I saw this, I was excited because quite literally This weekend, for the first time, I ordered Factor meals before I even knew. So I didn't even get to use the Locked On College code, which I'm going to tell you about in a second. But I don't know what your day is like, your week is like. But for me, I'm very busy. It's very hectic throughout the week. And in our weekends, we're not doing meal prep throughout the entire week. So for me, it's always been better to use a subscription meal service where I get meals for my week prepared already, tastes great, healthy, delivered to my door, boom, pop them in the microwave, you're done. And so this week, and literally for the first time, I ordered Factor. It's no meal prep, no mess meals. It's one of the reasons I ordered it. I mean, literally ordered it before I even knew I was going to be doing these reads for it. There's 35 different meals, more than 60 add-ons to choose from. It was really good for me to be able to choose what I wanted. Did I want chef's choice? Did I want a high protein diet? Whatever I was looking for, there was that option. So I was able to curate my menu and my meals are going to come in this week. So I'm going to be able to tell you firsthand how I like the food and how it's working for me, because I am a Factor customer. So join me. Head to factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50. Again, I'm so bummed because I could have used this code and saved 50%. Again, head to Factor, F-A-C-T-O-R, factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50. Use the code lockedoncollege50 to get 50% off your first box, plus 20% off your next month. I kind of want to go cancel and redo it now. That's code LOCKEDONCollege50 at factormeals.com/LOCKEDONCollege50. Again, get 50% off your first box, plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. Again, go to factormeals.com/LOCKEDONCollege50. Okay. Big get for LSU, Jalen Chapman. But that was part of the story this weekend for LSU and LSU recruiting. The Bayou Splash was this weekend, and Brian Kelly and his staff, if you're not familiar, the Bayou Splash is a massive recruiting event where some of the biggest recruits in the country come to Baton Rouge, and they spend a day. In this case, it was Friday. And when you look at the list of prospects that were here, it was a who's who. More than a dozen top 100 prospects, more than a handful of 5-star prospects, both for 2025 and 2026, which we'll get to. And coming out of this weekend, I'm going to give you 3 names that I think coming out of this weekend are heavy leans to pop for LSU. I'm going to get to those 3 names in a second here. But when you look at this list, this guest list, boy, it was prominent. And there were a lot of current LSU commits. Charles Ross, the linebacker, Damian Shanklin, the defensive end out of Indiana, Jace Thomas, the safety out of New Orleans, Tyler Miller, the interior offensive lineman, Zion Williams, the defensive lineman out of Texas. You can look, I mentioned 2026. I mean, when you look at some 5-stars, Jackson Cantwell, a 5-star offensive lineman for 2026. This was his first ever visit to LSU, raved about it. Jakeem Stewart, the number 1 player in the country for 2026 out of New Orleans and St. Aug, was back on campus at LSU. 5-star wide receiver Jamie French was back at LSU as well. We've talked about French. Jamie French, his mother is from the Feliciana. She went to Southern, so he's got ties here. French is an LSU sort of Texas battle there. So we'll see how that pans out. But LSU continues to be in a really good place for Jamie French. And then there's some other guys who we're keeping an eye on. Keelan Moses, who's an LSU commitment. Philip Wright, the wide receiver out of Destrehan, who is currently a Michigan commit, who most seem to believe is ultimately going to end up in this LSU class before it's all said and done. It feels like LSU was just late to the party. He had committed to Michigan, and now that LSU's given the offer, it feels really, really good for a guy like Wright to end up flipping that commit from Michigan to LSU. We'll see if and how that goes. But I mentioned there are 3 prospects that I think ultimately are going to end up in this LSU class with all of sort of the scuttle coming out of this weekend. One is Jaden Breaker. So Jaden Breaker is a linebacker out of Georgia who is currently committed to South Carolina. And he's got a lot of big boy offers, a lot of SEC offers. South Carolina, LSU, Kentucky. He's got offers out of the ACC as well, heavy ACC interest, Big Ten interest, Rutgers, NC State, for example. But Breaker is a guy that LSU has scouted. They feel really good about. He's a 3-star linebacker, 6'2.5", 210. But he's a guy that coming out of this weekend, making this trip to LSU, feels really good about. And it really seems as though that might be the next commitment in this class for LSU is Jaden Breaker again. Current from Georgia, a current South Carolina commit, but LSU flipping Breaker feels like the next big splash you might expect, if you'll forgive the pun, out of this recruiting class. One player we talked about last week with Shea Dixon from On 3 the Bengal Tiger before the Bayou Splash was Mike Tyler. So Mike Tyler is out of South Carolina. He's not committed to South Carolina, but he's from South Carolina. He's a tight end, 6'4", 220, and he's from Columbia, believe it or not. And he has a South Carolina offer, but he's got a lot of big offers as well. This is a 3-star tight end, the 14th best player in South Carolina. South Carolina, Ole Miss, NC State, Georgia Tech, Maryland, Duke, West Virginia, Virginia Tech, got a lot of ACC and regional SEC interest. But we've talked about so much for Brian Kelly, his ability to recruit and develop the tight end position. Remember, you signed 3 tight ends that were freshmen a year ago. Mac Markway remains. Kamorian Pimpton is very raw. Jackson McGowan left LSU after 1 season and transferred. Of course, you got Trades Green coming in this year, and you do return Mason Taylor. But after this year, let's say hypothetically, Mason Taylor goes pro. Mac Markway would be entering his junior year. Are you able to maintain? All of that depth without transfers? You have J.D. LaFleur from Louisiana, of course, the legacy there of David LaFleur, but J.D. LaFleur is committed. So LSU potentially looking here at a 2 tight end class. So Mike Tyler, another prospect that was on campus for the Bayou Splash that LSU is very high on and could pop. And the other one, this may be a surprise to some, but it's Anquan Fagans. And Anquan Fagans is a defensive back. He's a safety. And he's out of the state of Alabama. He's being recruited by Jake Olson and Corey Raymond. So the defensive back coaches there are kind of tag teaming this recruiting effort. But Anquan Fagans made his visit to LSU this weekend. He is thought to be a guy from Alabaster, Alabama, thought to be an Auburn lean. But this is a highly regarded guy. Anquan Fagans is the number 57 overall prospect in the country, according to the composite. The 5th best safety in the country, the 4th best player in the state of Alabama. And again, thought to be an Auburn lean, but he's got an offer from Auburn and Georgia and Bama. Now, of course, LSU, Miami, Clemson, Oregon, Tennessee, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, USC, Ole Miss, Florida State, Michigan, Penn State. You get the point? All of them. Everybody's in on Fagans. Again, he's a top 100 overall prospect. The composite, he's the number 57 player. And this feels like one that the Tigers have likely been able to turn the tide, if you'll forgive the Alabama pun. But Fagans is another one that came this weekend, had a massive weekend, and it could feel like LSU might be in the driver's seat there. So, again, 3 prospects from this weekend. That's not even counting, the Louisiana guys like a Philip Wright, who a lot of people feel like Philip Wright is going to end up in the class anyway. Aiden Anding, another guy that we've talked about a good bit from Ruston. Louisiana kids who it feels like there's an inevitability and an eventuality to landing them. Now you're talking about out-of-state guys who LSU, with their efforts here of late, seem to have gotten in the mix for, maybe are leading for. So those are 3 names: Jaden Breaker, Mike Tyler, and Anquan Fagans. Keep an eye on those 3 as we move through it. Okay. As we learn more about the recruiting developments, we'll get to that. It is Locked on LSU. We're so glad to have you with us. Thanks for making us your first listen every single day. Of course, as fall camps are about to start, maybe your second listen. How about Locked on SEC with my guy, Chris Gordy? Would highly recommend you go subscribe up to that podcast as well. Remember what they say, keep your friends close, your enemies closer. So make sure you're subscribed to Locked on SEC as well. Okay, it is Locked on LSU. We're glad to have you aboard with us here. When we come back, Bregman against Skeens in Houston, and your boy's going to be in that number. We'll talk about it next. Locked in LSU, your team every day. Brought to you today by FanDuel. Of course, I love sports. I know you do as well. I never want them to stop. But the playoffs wind down. We get fewer games. The sports aren't sporting like we want them to, but FanDuel lets us keep the sports going whenever we want. All we got to do is open up that FanDuel app and dream up bets anytime that we're in the mood. And you know, I already told you, Monday night, 7:10 p.m. Central Time, Astros Pirates. I'll be in that number there at Minute Maid. We'll get to see Paul Skeens against Alex Bregman for the first time. If you want to bet on that game, why not? Join me. You can do so at FanDuel. So download the FanDuel app. As a matter of fact, I'm looking at it right now. How about this? The Pirates with Skeens on the mound, minus 105 on the run line at plus 106. On the money line, they're minus 105. Pirates favorite in Houston with Skeens on the bump. How about that? Well, LSU on LSU action. You can check it out and you can wager on it if you want. Make sure you're taking advantage every single day of those boosts and bonuses, great Olympic bonuses and boosts as well. If you want to check them out, you can do so at FanDuel. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. So head over to FanDuel.com. Start making the most out of your summer. Again, that's FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, so let's put a button here on today's show with a little note on that. It is on Monday night, and I know we're not a Major League Baseball show, but we do talk about all things LSU, and you better believe there's tons of people who love the purple and gold who are locked in to Skeens against Bregman for the first time on Monday, and I'm so fired up that I'll be there. So actually, when you're watching Tuesday's show, I'm going to have recorded that show from the hotel room in Houston, and I'm fired up to be there to watch this game go down. A couple of things. Bregman started off so slowly this year. In the at the end of March and then into April, the beginning of the season, Bregman was hitting 216. In May, he bumped up to 221. In June, Alex Bregman hit 310. So far now through July, Bregman's at 297 with 3 homers, 12 RBI. He has been, and 13 runs scored. He has been awesome. And if you missed it on Saturday night against the Dodgers, Alex Bregman at the bottom of the ninth hit the walk-off homer. Alex Bregman looks like Alex Bregman again. It was a slow start, but he looks like a superstar player. The interesting thing about Bregman, of course, is this is a contract year. There's been a lot of scuttle about Bregman moving on from the Astros after this season. Remember, Monday night is the trade deadline. So there's some thought, what if the Astros say, hey, we're not going to let Bregman hit free agency. We'll move him now and get something for him. I don't know that that's likely. This is an Astros team that is certainly a championship contender. And if that's the case, you're not going to move one of your best players now. You're going to try to win a championship with him, and then you address the offseason when you get there if you're hoisting the commissioner's trophy. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. But Bregman, who had a slow start, is really elevating and looking like Alex Bregman again. And he's going to get to face Paul Skeens. Now, Paul Skeens suffered his first loss of his big league career last time out. It was last Tuesday. And Skeens was, what can you say? You get what you deserve, right? Paul Skeens last Tuesday against St. Louis, 8 1/3. That was a career long. 8 1/3. 2 runs on 4 hits, struck out 8, walked nobody, and took the loss because the Pirates gave him absolutely no run support. Pittsburgh lost the game 2-1. Skeens pitched into the 9th inning and allowed 2 runs and took the loss in the game. So my guess is Paul Skeens is maybe not just Skeens, but also that his Pirates teammates might be out with a little something to prove with the big fella on the mound because they did him dirty last time out. Skeens on the season is 6-1. He's got a 1.93 ERA, 97 strikeouts, and a whip of 0.87. If you don't know, whip is walks and hits per innings pitched. So sub-1 is incredible. 0.87 whip for Paul Skeens. He has just been absolutely stunning this season. And I am really excited to be able to watch him pitch in a big league ballpark in person on Monday night. And we'll certainly give you all that feedback after the game on Tuesday's episode. So be sure to be here. As we mentioned just a bit ago from our partners over at FanDuel, Skeens and the Pirates, a slight road favorite over Bregman and the Astros at Minute Maid on Monday night. Okay, that's going to do it for us here. Hey, do me a favor. If you're there on podcast, subscribe. Rate us, leave a review. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel. Smash that like button and hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. And be sure to let a friend know that if they love the Tigers, we're here every single day with football around the corner. Y'all, fall camp starts this week for LSU. You want daily updates. Boots on the ground. I will be at practice every time LSU gives us media availability. You want firsthand accounts? I'll give them to you every day right here. Locked on LSU, your team every day.